Hello, it's Andrew Eborn here with a very special edition of Lives on Lockdown, the Blue Plaque special. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to Lives on Lockdown with me, Andrew Eborn, and my very special guest, the wonderful, legendary broadcaster, Mike Reed.
Marvellous. I see a game of chess is in action over your shoulder.
Oh, check me out, mate. I love it. It's good. Do you play chess, Mike? I've never given you a game.
Yes, I play. Yeah, I used to play a lot. Played a lot at school. I enjoy chess, actually. The biggest disappointment ever for me was the year on my birthday that I knew I was getting the bicycle. I knew this was the year I was getting the bike, and I got the most fabulous chess set.
Oh.
And I was so ungrateful. I still feel guilty. It was like, oh, I was crestfallen, but it was great. No, I love playing chess, yeah.
What age were you when you got your first bike?
My first bike. Well, the first two-wheeler I rode, we had Americans that lived down the road from us who, so I grew up, a lot of American things. They had American bikes. Their father had a Dodge car. They had American comics, Dell Comics. They had an au pair I'd never heard of these things. They had Betty Crocker cake mix and waffles. I'd never heard of these things. So I had although a very English upbringing, a bit of an American upbringing as well, because I had 2 or 3 years of being with Americans a lot and reading their comics and riding their bikes.
Ah, fantastic. Well, I remember when it was my 7th birthday, I was offered, I was going to get one of these little pedal cars. You remember those? You used to sit in them and you could pedal along. But what I really wanted, firstly, I really wanted a hippopotamus, which wasn't going to be possible. But because we lived on a sort of, it would have really been fantastic. But because we lived on a sort of farm thing, I wanted to get a pig, a little piglet. Now, I knew, even at the age of 7, that my parents had already bought this little pedal car. So and they gave me a choice. They said, would you like the pedal car or the pig? And I said, I want the pig. So I ended up with both, which is fantastic. And Harvey was the little piglet's name, and gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous little thing to grow up with. But yeah, interesting time. What's that?
What did you do with Harvey?
Well, the 3-legged Harvey is still going strong.
Okay.
Harvey was one, we traded him for some bantams, which are very useful. So, my parents traded him. But Harvey was with us for at least a year. He was wonderful. I love little Harvey. So
my first pet was a tortoise called Johnny.
Oh, did you have a Johnny?
Little Johnny. He ran away, and I'm still waiting for him to come back because they do live for a long time.
Ran away. The tortoise ran away, and you couldn't catch him. It's extraordinary. Oh, we love it. Yeah, we used to have tortoises. We used to have all sorts of. Did you put him down for hibernation as well? So every year you had to put him in hay and.
That's right. I always remember the Tony Hancock sketch where Sid James sold him a tortoise, and Hancock said, "There's nothing in there. I poked a stick in all the holes, and there's nothing in there. It sold him a shell." It's just a very funny sketch.
Oh, brilliant. I know Hancock was superb, wasn't he? And we were talking about Hancock this week a lot because it's Mental Health Awareness Week this week. And obviously poor old Tony had all sorts of struggles, as many people do in the public eye.
That's right. And they're showing his film The Rebel on this week. But he made the Punch and Judy Man at Bognor Regis with Hugh Lloyd, wasn't it? Yeah, Hugh Lloyd. Yeah. And I spoke to him, and he said, Tony was drunk most of the time we made it, but it was a great film, a lot of pathos in it, and sadly, it's something you couldn't do now. He was the Punch and Judy Man, and it was raining one day. This little kid standing there looking rather forlorn because there's no Punch and Judy, and he said, "Sorry, son, not today." And he thought, "Oh," and he said, "Never mind, come on." And he took the little boy by the hand to the ice cream parlor, and they both sat there eating a Knickerbocker Glory together. If you did that now, you'd be in trouble. Isn't that sad? That
it is sad.
Those are sort of people we've lost that wonderful naivety. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely glorious. And Bognor Regis is not too far actually from where I grew up. I grew up in a place called Bracklesham Bay. It's only a few miles away from Bognor, between Bognor Regis, I guess, and Portsmouth, if you know that sort of West Wittering sort of way. But fantastic. Now, one of the things I like, talk about beaches, one of the things I love about when we get together, first of all, you always call me the King of Cannes when we go down there, and we are the great double act walking around. Everybody knows us, but doing that sort of stuff. And we're there peddling some fantastic formats. One of the things that I love about you is that very, very similar, that we like to get things done. And we came across the Magic Circle, as you know, I've been a member since Frozen to Death, was set up in 1905. And ever since 1905, they've been wanting to get a blue plaque, and where its first ever meeting took place, which was the 23 Magicians on Wardour Street, a restaurant called Pinoli's. And because you are a man who delivers, you and I got together and negotiated with Westminster Council and everything else, and I found out a lot more about the Blue Plaque Trust. Tell me a bit more about that and how it got set up.
Yeah, well, the British Plaque Trust, I mean, we did yours and we got Dynamo to come and unveil it, which was fantastic. And all the magicians back in their old home, which I thought was wonderful. Blue Plaque, it was inception, came up with a guy called William Ewart, who was an MP. He was a great champion of libraries, William Ewart, of founding libraries. And now he has his own plaque. But he suggested this commemorative marker for people who lived in houses of different genres, whatever it was. You know, people that have contributed something special to their country in the field of sport, medicine, theatre, politics, music, art, drama, whatever it is. And the first plaque went up in 1867 to Byron in Hollis Street. That house was subsequently pulled down. The plaque has now been reinstated in a sort of way, but the oldest existing one from the late 1860s is Napoleon III in St. James's. And the Royal Society of Arts ran it, put up these commemorative blue plaques until 1901. Then it was taken over by the LCC, and they ran it until the GLC took over in mid-60s. And then the GLC ran it until their demise, which I think was about 1986, the GLC ground to a halt, and it was taken over by English Heritage. Of course, English Heritage do a lot of other things. The blue plaques are a tiny little percentage of what they do, and they are London-centric as well. And for many years, as you know, I worked with the Heritage Foundation, of which Robin Gibb was the president, I was the vice president, and we worked on a lot of blue plaques over the years, and then thought that maybe it should be done quite differently, that the hierarchy of the Heritage Foundation, Nicholas Parsons and Leslie Phillips, said, look, let Mike and Robin run it because they're historians. Anyway, we founded the British Plaque Trust, and we've been going for 10 years, and obviously the Heritage Foundation for about 15, 20 years before that. So and it works very well. We do it all over the country, and 18 months ago, for the first time, I said, look, as we're moving towards the Brexit situation, we have a Commonwealth of 2.4 billion people. It's not 53 countries out there. Why don't we extend the Blue Plaque scheme for the first time into the Commonwealth? So the first one we did was in Barbados for the 3 Ws of West Indian cricket, Worrell, Weeks and Walcott. Everton Weeks is still alive, and he unveiled it with me. Great turnout. Prime Minister, government, Eddie Grant was there as well. Everton Weeks.
Was Rihanna there in Barbados?
Sorry, well, we went past Rihanna's street. She has a street named after her, but she wasn't too involved with the cricket. But we had a lot of support from, Wes Hall, Charlie Griffith, Gary Sobers, all now knights, all these great cricketing knights of the West Indies. It was a phenomenal turnout, and the first ever, a very historic moment, the first ever Commonwealth Blue Plaque, a very historic moment. It was very, very moving, and Everton Weeks talked about his 2 pals, Walcott and Worrell. And the weird thing for me was a real bit of serendipity. The first cricketer I ever met was Frank Worrell when I was 4 years old. They had to come and play in a local side before they were allowed into a county side. Anyone coming to the country had to play in. And this guy came down the road one day on a bike and stopped to talk to my grandfather, who he knew. And he's wearing a trilby on his bike. And he said, Michael, this is Mr. Worrell. He's a cricketer. I said, hello, Mr. Worrell. Not thinking all those years later, I'd be in Barbados unveiling a plaque to him with his teammate Everton Weeks. Fantastic.
Brilliant. And it is wonderful. And how many have you done now? Because you cover, what I love about this is that every one of the Blue Plaque has a fantastic story. And it could be like a whole program in itself. And you eat up and regurgitate history in a way that Robin Gibb used to love as well. And that sort of side is really interesting. So how many Blue Plaques have you done?
We've probably done, well, with the Heritage Foundation, lots, maybe 100, whatever, I don't know. We've probably done about 70 or 80. We worked with BBC Music Day in 2017 and formed 40 committees around the country, local BBC areas. And then we had a sort of national committee and decided. So I worked with the BBC for about 6 months on that because they came to me looking for ideas and I suggested this. And they said, wonderful, absolutely wonderful. So that worked very, very well, and was very well organized. And what I did was I did a 35,000 word document and sent it out to all the local BBC stations and said, look, find your section, and I've suggested people you can talk about on air from your area, different genres. I said, and as you're doing it, your listeners will come through with other people. Say, what about old Fred, the folk artist? He was wonderful. He inspired lots of kids. Whatever, music teachers. I said, people will come up with other ideas, which they did. So then they talked to their listeners, talked amongst themselves, and sent us a top 3. And then we looked at that and tried to go with number 1 unless there was a problem with it. And that worked very, very well. All the Plaques went out virtually on the same day. I think there's one still outstanding 3 years later because they're renovating the house. So you've got one outstanding, but there were so many that we had to put a temporary one up in places. For example, I got a couple down here. These are 2 of the temporary ones. When we did Buddy Holly, this one went up on the wall before the real one went up as like a holding blue plaque. And Buddy Holly and the Crickets, that was at Salisbury. And he did one tour here with the Crickets. So the reason, we chose that place is because it still exists. Behind the curtains and behind the hardboard, and all the wiring and speakers that Buddy Holly used. So it's still very much as it is the building, and he's very well documented in staying there. They're having tea, they were seen around the town, they were videoed in the town. So that was the sort of, so this was commemorating a tour. We did it in Salisbury, and Kevin Montgomery came and helped unveil it. His father, Bob Montgomery, Buddy and Bob started together before the Crickets as a duo, as Buddy and Bob, and he wrote some of Buddy's hits for him and with him, and Kevin came and unveiled it. So it was a very, very good day because I worked with the Buddy Holly Foundation a lot. So that was great. When I did the book, about 2 years ago, I did a book on Blue Plaques. In fact, this one here, folks, still very much available,
Oh, fantastic. That's one of the really rare unsigned ones, isn't it, Mike?
It's one of the rare unsigned ones. I do spoil them occasionally. But what the publisher said is, could you, maybe you could link them all together. I thought, okay, now that is a real test of linking them together. For example, the way we start exciting, Charlie Chaplin, right? Charlie Chaplin in 1954 had already written the song Smile. Smile though your heart is breaking. 54, he came to Jimmy Phillips' office in Denmark Street as Jimmy was working on the lyrics for Smile to make it for just a tune into a most beautiful song. So one day Charlie Chaplin turned up at the door and he's there. And next door was Lawrence Wright's office. Lawrence Wright was the first publisher in Denmark Street, Tin Pan Alley, where all the publishers were, in 1908. He was the very first publisher there. He founded the Melody Maker magazine. And he wrote a song, so I've linked from Charlie Chaplin to Lawrence Wright's plaque, because he has a plaque in his hometown. Lawrence Wright actually wrote a song about Amy Johnson. He wrote a very famous song called Amy. Amy Johnson, of course, has her own plaque. As you head out of town, going up through Finchley Way towards Finchley, up the Finchley Road, block of flats on the corner there, she's got a blue plaque there, Amy Johnson. And then we move forward from her to Billy Butlin, because Billy Butlin in 1938 engaged Amy Johnson to be guest of honor and open his very first holiday camp in Skegness. So he moved to Barry Island, where there is a plaque to Billy Butlin. And from Billy Butlin, we go to Rick Parfitt at Status Quo, because Rick and Francis Rossi met at Butlin's Minehead. That's where they met and formed Status Quo, which is wonderful. So from Status Quo, I go to L.S. Lowry, because their first hit was Pictures of Matchstick Men.
Of course it was, absolutely. I love this, and it's a great challenge. Challenge Mike Reed. We were talking about Challenge Annika earlier, but challenge Mike Reed. You will find a link. You've got one of these wonderful creative brains. It sounds superb. So each of the chapters leads into the other in your book.
Each one, yeah. I mean, each one, there is a link. You look at the bottom, you think, I didn't, for example, L.S. Lowry leads into a guy called Kenny Davenport. Now, if you said that name, you'd go, don't know Kenny Davenport, but he achieved something. He died not knowing he'd done it on September the 8th, 1888, on the same day that the body of Annie Chapman, Jack the Ripper's, one of Jack the Ripper's murder victims, was discovered. He scored the first ever Football League goal. September the 8th, 1888, the first ever Football League goal was scored by Kenny Davenport. It has a blue plaque. But you don't link it, football, with Jack the Ripper. The same day that Annie Chapman's body was discovered, a few doors down from where there's a blue plaque to Bud Flanagan, who was born a few years later, a few doors down from where Annie Chapman was discovered. So it's 6 degrees of separation. There are links everywhere. You can find them everywhere.
And even actually, Mike, the Davenports is one of the most famous and magical families. And they used to have a fantastic shop just at the bottom, you know, the little vaults that run underneath Charing Cross station. And Davenports is a very, very famous store and family. And Betty Davenport is still very much alive and thriving now as an online thing. So there are links everywhere, as you say. Interesting. So talk me through the process then, because you must get inundated with people saying, you must put up a blue plaque here. How do you decide? I know there's a committee of trustees. Talk me through the decision-making process.
Well, people do apply, and we come up with ideas as well. Then we'll talk it through. We'll have a list which you have at the moment of potential recipients, and every now and again we review them, and you go, okay, well, let's keep that one on the pile. Some are important because of dates. You've got something coming up, so we'd love to hit that date for this. That would be ideal. We've got one this year that I really, really wanted to hit, but because of lockdown we've missed, but we will do later in the year. So yeah, sometimes you get that. Sometimes you have to be diplomatic. One woman wrote to me and said, I'd like a blue plaque for this pioneering female parachutist. And I said, right, well, you know, was she the first? Well, not exactly the first, but one of the first. I thought, okay, so one of the first female parachutists. It's already starting to look a bit eggy. I said, well, where does she live? Well, her house is now under a dual carriageway. Okay, so that negates that. I said, where did she live after that? Well, that's under a roundabout now. I said, look, I think we're going to have a problem here. I said, why don't you, so rather than saying no, I said, why don't you write a little book about her? I think that would be good. What a good idea. So you're trying not to say no, you're trying to give, you know, some sort of encouragement, because when people move into a house or they live in a house where they know someone famous has lived, then immediately, as someone did 2 weeks ago, we just moved into so-and-so's house, can we have a blue plaque? So you have to be, you have to be diplomatic. We've got a few pot boiling at the moment, and then we go back and say, how important is this one? So yeah, that one is second in line at the moment. This one's third in line. And again, one might come up where it jumps the others for a particular reason. I mean, last year we were doing one to the Beatles at Stowe School, which was the only school gig they ever did. They played for £100 just as they topped the charts. So it's a unique occasion, a very well-documented occasion. There's this band, #1 in the chart. It's the biggest group ever, and they played for £100 at Stowe School. And Paul McCartney said, we could hear ourselves. He said, awful. He said, we could hear ourselves, you know. And when I knew we were doing it, I thought, you know, it's a pity none of the Beatles will be there to, you know, to unveil it. And I dropped Paul a note, and he came straight back with a page, a lovely page, for me to read out on the night. And he remembered it with absolute clarity. You see, it was very strange, though, because normally they were used to screaming, getting on there. So suddenly we could hear ourselves.
Oh, glorious. And what's also interesting, Mike, is that a lot of people don't know the amount of work that's required. It's not just a question of turning up with a couple of people and nails and banging this thing in. Talk us through what actually needs to be done, council permissions and closing roads and organising celebrity audiences. Give us an idea of the sort of work involved to get the blue plaque in place.
Yeah, well, they all vary. We don't have a set format for it. First of all, we'll have the conversation, and then we'll look at a potential date. I will tell the Foundry. I've been up to the Foundry and film, so I know the whole process. I've watched the whole process, which generally takes 5 or 6 weeks. We can push it through more quickly if they're not too busy. I say a bit of an emergency, so they're pretty good like that. Then they send it down, and you hope you've got to open it. You can't leave it sealed up for a long time. If it's sometimes people have them quite a bit up front because they want them up front. Sometimes people want a duplicate just in case. Well, that's fine. You know, they can, you know, keep it hidden away somewhere. So yeah, so we tell the Foundry send it down. I would contact the person and say, do you have someone that is able to fix it to the wall? All the fixings are with it. Yes, we have. Right, I'll bring it to you. Let's look at the location. I generally like to go to the location and have a look. I did recently. I spent about 3 hours for one we're hoping to do later this year, and we're looking and say, what about that? Don't know that. What about that? And we really spent a good 3 hours, just me and the people that have the building. And eventually we decided where it was most likely to be. But it was quite a good discussion. Sometimes it's obvious. Other times, you know, Tim Rice emailed me a couple of weeks ago and said, is this one of yours? There's one to the Bee Gees in London where it's peeling. I mean, it shouldn't peel. I mean, these things last forever. So again, I've contacted the company and said, look, you know, we should really try and fix this. It just doesn't look good for you. You know, the building's been empty for ages. But then again, a lot of buildings in London are owned by, you know, vast companies abroad, and they've got properties just sitting there that aren't doing anything. Yeah. And this one, it does look terrible.
It does, and that's the extraordinary thing, because people, as I say, most people assume you just slap it on. The Magic Circle one, for example, the people who had to be approached, you needed Westminster Council, as you say, Shaftesbury were the people who owned the building, so they needed to be approached. The tenant of the restaurant needed to be approached. You need to get the celebrities there. Dynamo, who came and unveiled it, he needed to be approached. There was a huge amount of planning for several months before it just happened, didn't it?
Yeah, there is. We had that with our Pinoli plaque in Denmark Street with Camden Council. And normally it would be a little bit easier than Westminster Council. Westminster Council can take a while. If a property is listed as well, you have a problem. What are you going to do to it? Is it going to be detrimental to the property? Other people who have one on their house, is it going to increase the value of my property? Nobody won't decrease it, and it's a nice thing to have. Some people don't want it. We talked to one couple who said, no, we don't want a plaque in our house, thank you very much. One I went to for David Bowie, the guy was downright rude. I mean, just opened the door that much and used a few Anglo-Saxon expletives about why he didn't want to fine. Okay. That's rare. That's very, very rare. So yeah, the householder definitely. And they always say, you know, do I have to look after it? Is it now my responsibility? Well, sort of. They look after themselves, really. I think that's the thing, you know. Give it a polish now and again, but generally it looks after itself. But yes, if something is listed, it can take longer. When we did Denmark Street, I mean, there are houses. It's the only street in London where there are houses from the 1600s on both sides of the road. So a lot of people were saying, oh, they're demolishing it. Well, they can't. It's Grade 2 listed right the way down, virtually right the way down the road. And we had, quite a long time getting a yes from them. It was a yes, but there were various hurdles and hoops we had to jump through.
Right, and what's incredible as well, and that's why I think it's ideal for a TV series, is that the Blue Plaque then acts, just you talking about the glue between the different stories, the Blue Plaque itself acts as a catalyst for all sorts of stories about what happened to that location.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, if you're in Lambeth and you stand there looking at Captain Bligh's plaque, you think he walked down those steps not knowing what was going to happen to him. Not knowing, you know, the mutiny on the Bounty was going to occur. Amazing. And then, you know, again, if you take a link, you mentioned that, you can link to Charles Lawton, who played Captain Bligh in the film. And then you could link to Jimmy Kennedy. Here's a link for you. Jimmy Kennedy was coming back, a songwriter, great songwriter, Red Sails in the Sunset, South of the Border, Teddy Bear's Picnic, The Hokey Cokey, Hang Out the Washing on the Sea-Free Line. Our most successful writer in America until Lennon and McCartney. Well, Jimmy Kennedy had dropped his sister and his mother off at Southampton, driving back to Weybridge, got lost in the fog, didn't know where he was, missed the A3, turned round in a pub car park, and the car headlights picked out the name of the pub, the Harbour Lights. By the time he got back to Weybridge, he'd written most of the song, which was the very first song that Elvis recorded commercially. Vera Lynn did it, in Crosby, everyone. I see those harbor lights. So the first song that Elvis ever did commercially was written about a pub in Portsmouth. Now, and the link there to Charles Lawton is that the Ed Sullivan Show, the biggest TV show along with Dick Clark and Bandstand in the States, there was 1 week when he couldn't do it. There was 1 week when he had a bad car accident, he was out of action. So they had to get somebody to stand in for Ed Sullivan. And who do they get to stand in? But a guy born in the late 1890s, Charles Laughton, an English actor, is standing in on this rock and roll. So Charles Laughton is the one that first has to introduce Elvis. Let's go now to Elvis Presley. So there's a link between Charles Laughton's plaque, if you want one, and Jimmy Kennedy's plaque in Portsmouth, which is the only British plaque that mentions Elvis. But he was the first one to introduce Elvis because Ed Sullivan couldn't make it that way. It's a bit of trivia.
I love it. And whereabouts, because my sister lives in Portsmouth, and I say I'm often down there. Whereabouts is it? Where is that Blue Plaque? People can go and see it. Cosham, okay. Do you remember the name of the pub? Is it still a pub?
It's called the Harbour Lights.
It's still called the Harbour Lights, of course. Oh, fantastic.
It's called the Harbour Lights. And as you walk in the front door to go and get your pint, there it is. He's staring you in the face.
Oh, brilliant. Well, there's an incentive. When lockdown has finished, I'll tell you what, I'll take you down for your first tipple. What would you have? What would your first tipple be?
It depends how thirsty I was. Maybe half a lager shandy.
Half a lager shandy. Okay, well that's going to be.
I mean, it's still wild if you like.
Okay.
But the great thing about that plaque is that I got Jimmy Kennedy Jr., his son, to come over from France and unveil it.
Oh, fantastic!
He's so proud that it was a plaque to his dad.
I know, and isn't that great when the youngsters come through and they've got that sort of admiration for their father? The same way with RJ and Robin, and I know the massive sort of things there. The Bee Gees plaque you were mentioning earlier, whereabouts is that one?
That was I think it's in Green Street, isn't it? I think it's Green Street. Yeah, the old Stigwood offices.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, you're right about sons. Chris Drake is a chum of mine, and he really waves the flag for his dad when there are films on TV. Very proud of Charlie, of his dad, what he's done. And Anthony Bygraves is a great chum, and of course, not only a great champion of his dad, but he worked with him a lot. He went on tour with him. He went on TV with him. So and looks like him. And he's a very talented lad, but it's lovely and a real champion of his dad and what his dad did, and sort of keeps the legacy going, which is great.
I know, and I love that whole thing, as you know, with RJ. That's what we're doing about that's the word. It's the legacy tour. But there are so many musicians whose family members have continued to be musical themselves. I mean, obviously Julian Lennon is a great talent, and you have the McCartneys. They've obviously gone slightly different routes, but Stella's superb. In her creative way,
and Molly Marriott, Steve Marriott's daughter, is a very talented musician, and again another one that's very proud of her father and what he achieved, and flies the flag for him, which is wonderful. I find that very moving, very touching, and it's great because so many of the rock and rollers. I mean, Paul McCartney once said, he said, "Hey, I thought when my kids grow up, they're going to go, oh, dad stuff, He said, but actually they quite like it. And I think that's lovely because there is that natural tendency of the next generation to reject parental things and go, oh, that's what my parents did. I want to do something different. I mean, David Bowie's son did, for example, changed his name back to Jones and went into the film side of things. Very proud of his dad, obviously. But some people happy to follow in their father or their mother's footsteps, and others that don't. Well, I mean, look at Judy Garland and Liza Minnelli and Lorna Luft. But a lot of people try and encourage their kids not to do it. They say, "Oh, don't go into show business."
And the other thing they do, as you say, they change their name so people don't say you've got that job because you're such and such a person's daughter or son or whatever it is. So they will work under a different name.
Yeah, I mean, I remember Julian Lennon came down to the house for the weekend, and he said, "Oh, I'm a bit worried because people say I sound like my dad," and I said, "Well, I probably sound like my dad as well. You've probably got the same voice box. It's natural. It's not an unnatural thing. It's not like you're somebody else trying to be John Lennon. You're his son. Of course, there are going to be similarities, looks-wise or sound-wise. It's inevitable. You can't deliberately say, I'll try and be very, very different. It's got to be you." And I think in the end, you probably rolled with that and went, yeah.
They embrace all of that sort of stuff. Finally, just for now, I say it's a fascinating story. And each of the Blue Plaques you've done, each of the British Trust plaques, has got a fantastic story with it. A favourite is probably Tin Pan Alley, or do you have a particular favourite of yours?
I don't know whether I have a favourite. One of the interesting ones was the one we did at Wembley for the 150th anniversary of the Football Association. And they wanted to do something, and we had quite a few meetings. They said, yes, we'd love to do a Blue Plaque here. The rules were drawn up like 150 years earlier, headed by a committee that was fronted by Ebenezer Cobb Morley. Now,
Great
Ebenezer
name.
Cobb Morley,
Great name. Love it.
he didn't have any issue, but some of the other founding fathers on the committee did. So the FA flew people in from different countries around the world, the descendants of the founding fathers. So there are about 20 people who are descended from the founding fathers of football. Because originally I was going to do it on Ebenezer Cobb Morley's house in Barnes,
Right.
owned by a very, very well-known singer, who initially said yes, and then said no. That's where he wrote the rules up, and they are extant. You can go and see them. They are there. His rules, neatly written, still exist.
Right.
Yes, then no, then oh dear, it's like the fish being played. Well, make up your mind. The estate agent said, well, she can be tricky. And then the house fell down. Somebody took an RSJ out where they shouldn't, and like £6 million worth of house became a pile of bricks. So I thought, good job we didn't do it there then.
Right.
And then Wembley said, the FA said, well, surely Wembley would be the obvious place. So there it is. And when I went last year to watch the challenge match, the FA Cup winners, the league winners, and when I got there, one of the security guys, he said, hello, Mike. He said, you want to come and have a photograph with your plaque? And I said, oh, yes, please. Yeah, that'd be great. And I got, when we unveiled it, I got Bill and Judy McAlpine down because, of course, the McAlpines had built the 1923 famous Wembley with the Twin Towers. Yeah. So Bill was delighted to go back for the unveiling of the 150th, his family having built the 1923 stadium. And here's one for you. Here's one for you. Okay. What was originally, where are the football pitches now? What was originally in the center of the pitch? What stood there?
Oh, I don't know, a statue or something, or a fountain. I don't know. Is that something unusual? What would it have been?
Our Eiffel Tower.
Oh, there you go.
We started building an Eiffel Tower. We got about a third of the way up and ran out of money. So that is where our Eiffel Tower, to rival Paris, was going to be. They dismantled it in the end, and that's where the pitch is.
Oh, fantastic. Took it up to Blackpool. Is that where they got theirs instead?
No, they scrapped it, I think.
Mike, it's always a joy to talk to you. I love so many tales of these. The book is still available in all good bookshops and some bad ones as well, which is all good. How many of the Blue Plaques are in that? How far up do you go?
Oh, it's just general. Yeah, it's just general black. It's 100. It is the writing on the wall. 100 iconic Blue Plaques commemorating Britain's history.
Fantastic. I love it. Mike, it's a real joy to see you as always. Be safe, be careful, stay alert, yeah?
I will. Absolutely. I won't go anywhere.
I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot, Mike. Take care.
Cheers, Andrew. Bye.
Bye. There you go. So that was the legendary Mike Reed joining me again here on Lives on Lockdown. I love those British Plaque Trust work that they do. And each one of those Blue Plaques tells a story and is a catalyst for many, many more stories. Speaking of which, if you'd like to join me on the programme, write to LOL, that's LOL, at octopustv.com. Don't forget to subscribe to Octopus TV for all more exclusive content. But for now, I've been Andrew Eborn. You've been great. Be good, be safe, stay alert.